EPA confirming aluminum contamination in waterways throughout California. This is from Cal EPA. There's about 26 lab tests in here confirming that there is aluminum, barium, strontium in our air. What we're all breathing here, we're all exposed to. We face a lot of legitimate challenges here. I agree with you. I agree with a lot of points brought up, but I would ask anybody in the room, what challenges will we face if we're inhaling aluminum on a day in, day out basis? If our streams are contaminated with aluminum, how can we prepare when our soils no longer grow properly, when we have a UV issue that's off the charts? So when we have Cal EPA stating that this is not in their jurisdiction, these climate modification programs that are absolutely going on, we have CARB saying not in their jurisdiction, Shasta County saying not in their jurisdiction. I would like to ask, since we know these programs are...
Maybe the federal EPA, because they're trying to take over every mud puddle and ditch and backyard pond in the world, so maybe somebody will find it. Right?
It is part of it. Water rights are being pursued, and we know the drought is a 2 + 2 = 4 equation. We have the satellite imagery to prove it up. So I'm going to hand this data off to you. I have a copy for you and for your staff. My question would be this: since everybody is passing the buck here, will your office address the fact that we have an absolute, positively, like a heavy metal contamination issue that cannot be disputed? It's a public health hazard. We have a UV radiation issue that's so intense it's burning the bark off of trees. All appear to be related to these climate modification programs, but these issues are indisputable public health hazards. Since nobody else will address it, will your office address it?
People believe that the same aircraft can release experimental chemical additives in the air as chemical contrails or chemtrails. In this way, government agencies can either manipulate the weather or counteract global warming. But some people claim chemtrails are harming an unsuspecting public. Eyewitnesses and researchers who believe in chemtrails say that jet contrails don't vanish within minutes as they once did. They now linger and spread, sometimes for hours, forming strange, suspicious patterns. Rosalind Peterson is one of those believers.
It's not normal for us. It's a grand experiment.
Peterson lives in Northern California near San Francisco. At one time, she worked for the State Department of Agriculture. Part of her job involved being aware of environmental issues.
I first started noticing unusual contrails in 2002 when it was brought to my attention by a friend of mine. He took me outside of his office and we began to look at these persistent jet contrails.
Peterson thought she saw a connection between aircraft activity and reports of chemically contaminated water in communities throughout California.
There were unusual high spikes in chemicals and heavy metals. Barium, aluminum, manganese, magnesium, zinc. And I suspect that we're getting the pollution from something in the atmosphere that's being released.
Peterson became so alarmed about the chemical contrails that she formed an organization called California Skywatch, a group dedicated to clean air.
I started documenting what I was seeing. I took pictures on my breaks. I took pictures at lunch hour. I started to really get angry because our once deep blue skies were no longer deep blue. They would turn into a white haze, and they would turn into these man-made clouds blocking the sunlight.
Peterson discovered that she wasn't alone in her concerns. Hundreds of websites revealed that persistent airplane contrails had become a worldwide problem.
I started then to research internet sites and government agencies, the EPA, NOAA, NASA, the United States Air Force. I learned that there was a lot of atmospheric heating and testing programs going on. I learned that there was lots of equipment that would leave these type of persistent plumes and spray chemicals.
Will Thomas is an investigative journalist who believes that some contrails are part of secret atmospheric experiments. He's been writing about them for over 10 years.
This is a deliberate project to slow down global warming. These trails were appearing over rural areas, away from navigational beacons and normal air routes. They would appear for weeks at a time and then disappear entirely, only to reappear months later, unlike normal scheduled air traffic.
Thomas believes chemical contrails are an indication that someone is using jet emissions to engineer the weather and slow climate change.
The problem problem with chemtrails is that when we attempt to geoengineer and interfere with complex interrelated atmospheric processes, we are in for unintended consequences on a major scale.
Geoengineering is the artificial manipulation of Earth's environment on a large scale. In the early 1990s, American nuclear physicist Edward Teller was among the first scientists to model an experiment that would address the issue of global warming. He speculated that aluminum oxide could be injected into the upper atmosphere. It would act like tiny mirrors and deflect a portion of the sun's rays back into space. Supposedly, it was never put into practice. But activists believe the government has revived Teller's theory with some dire health consequences.
Some of the literal fallout from this chemtrail project are these 10-micron particulates falling by the megaton on unsuspecting people, plants, and wildlife. Now, a human hair is 100 microns across. 10 microns is submicroscopic. It can impact our lungs, it can inflame our hearts, give us heart disease, leading to fatalities. So this material comes down randomly in invisible clumps.
Dave Dickey also believes in chemtrails. As a landscape contractor for a large city, he spends a lot of time out of doors.
Contrail development is different than it ever has been in the past. And I do remember one in January of about 2002, where the number of flights overhead were extremely unusual. The number of contrails in the sky was unbelievable. We were counting 40 to 60 flights.
Called solar radiation
40 to 60
management.
flights. Most of them left an incredibly persistent large plume, which would spread out and cover the sky.
As a landscaper, Dickey has to be familiar with the types of trace chemicals usually found in the environment. He regularly takes water and soil samples and has them tested.
There was some research done that claimed that aluminum oxide could be used to reduce global warming. And I thought that if there was any chance that aluminum oxide would be used in the atmosphere, that it would show up in precipitation.
He collected rain samples on days when he noticed heavier than usual air traffic and took them to a lab.
And I expected to see baseline measurements where aluminum would show up in precipitation at about 0.0093 milligrams per liter. Very small amount of aluminum naturally present in precipitation. It was 20 times higher approximately than what was expected to find.
Dave Dickey believes that what he captured was the fallout from chemically laden contrails.
I was really hoping that we'd find natural water samples, and when I did find aluminum and barium, it's just another one of the indicating factors that something was unusual.
Theoretically, scientists can cool the Earth using chemical compounds placed in the upper atmosphere. But could other substances be put there for more ominous purposes?
Damn right.
Military victory or defeat can depend on the weather. A commander who can control the weather has a weapon as powerful as any Air Force. During the Vietnam War, the U.S. military began seeding clouds along the Ho Chi Minh Trail to create floods and wash out North Vietnamese supply routes. It was known as Operation Popeye, and crews flew over 2,000 spray missions.
I was told initially by a friend, he said his brother was in the military service. He said when there is these heavy spray days when there's lots of persistent contrails to keep his family inside, when they were outside exposed, to have them go in and take showers. And he couldn't talk about it. He couldn't explain more than that.
It's overcast.
This is a global operation, and it affects everybody and every living thing. So this is that important.
There are arguments put forth that chemtrails, or these man-made clouds, are all normal due to the right atmospheric conditions, but this is not a reasonable argument. The fact is that the introduction of fine chemicals or aerosols into the atmosphere have a profound effect on cloud formation. Unfortunately, this is not taken into consideration by scientists to explain the phenomenon that we are all witnessing.
Can particles influence the formation of clouds? I went to Geneva to visit CERN. where scientists study how particles and radiation influence the formation of clouds.
We assume that there are man-made effects influencing today's formation of clouds through humans' direct introduction of various particles into the atmosphere, and these particles then serving as condensation nuclei for the formation of clouds, which influence the climate, because the properties of clouds, how long they persist, and how much sunlight they reflect, that changes, depending on how much additional man-made aerosols are put into the air.